This morning we're going to be looking at the book of Ruth. And I'm going to be reading just a couple of verses. And we will start from verse 15. And I read, "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave. Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. I'll be sharing with us this morning about what I titled "Going Further Resolutely." Going further resolutely. Going further resolutely. Let me share a brief story about my experience. Having been into missions since 2006 in different places in West Africa, I realized at a point that I needed formal training, formal training in ministry or missions, or I just realized that I needed, formal training, because I had been trained as a science teacher before that time, and I had taught, sciences in high school, but at a certain point, I realized that, look, if I'm going to serve God, I need to get training. And to cut the long story short, I got admitted into ACU in Abilene, and I was overjoyed. I was very happy. As the days drew near, for me to leave, the joy that I had initially turned into fear, and then into anxiety, and then into worry. A new land, new people, new cultures, new tribes, new food. Would I fit in? Would I be able to acculturate? Would I be able to, blend into the culture? Because that's a very, very important thing in missions. The rate at which you can absorb that culture. Will I be able to cope? I was going to leave my family at that time. My questions were endless. And then my anxiety began to choke my ability to prepare myself emotionally and physically for what was ahead. My anxiety got so strong. And by the time I got on the flight from Lagos to New York, I was sick. I was sick. And I was so miserable on that flight. because I wasn't just myself. Now, with that at the back of our minds, there's so much anxiety about moving forward in most areas of our lives. For example, the year is ending. We're moving into a new year. There's so many things going on in my mind, even right now. There's so many things going on in our minds right now. Now, let's go into the story. We are familiar with the story of Ruth and Naomi. The story is filled with many things for us to learn as we move into the new year. And one thing that struck me in this story was God's providence. God's providence in a new land. Ruth was going into what? Into a new land, a new people, a new culture. And looking at the story and the challenges that she had in that process, so many things come up for us today. How was Ruth able to access God's providence in a new land? How was Ruth able to access, to get into God's providence in a new land? As the year runs to an end, as we're thinking about the new year, how do we get into that providence of God? And as I looked at this text and, studied, some things came out to me. One of it was appreciation. When we look at the story of Ruth and Naomi, you find that in verse 8 to 9, Naomi appreciated her daughter-in-laws. She appreciated her daughters-in-law. Verse 8 and 9, she appreciated them, she prayed for them. What does appreciation do? Appreciating God for where we are today helps us to see clearly what we should be doing. It lightens our burdens most times. Appreciation helps us to see the good in others around us, even during setbacks and dashed hopes, like what Ruth and Naomi were experiencing. Setbacks, dashed hopes, losses. There was still room for appreciation. Naomi was still able to appreciate these women who had stood by her. Another thing that I saw as I looked at this text that came out to me in how I can access God's providence, in this new year ahead, in this new land ahead. Prayer came to me. Naomi prayed for Ruth. Prayer came to me. Prayer helps us to open our weaknesses to God. It opens us up to God. Prayer. Another thing that came to me as I looked at this text was intentionality. Intentionality. Ruth was intentional about what she was doing. She was intentional. She was clear about what she was doing. And after that, she became very resolute. If you look at verse 15 and 16, she said, your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Ruth was faced with the option of moving into a new land, a new culture, new people, pretty much like what the new year represents. There was every reason to go back as Oprah did, but Ruth was resolute. Your God will be my God, she told Naomi. Ruth was perceiving a way through the new land ahead. She was seeing God's providence. Even when Naomi, at that moment, all her mind was at that time. Ruth's focus was on the God of Israel. She was able to place that above all the fears and anxieties that faced her. Ruth listened to the pleas and entreaties of Naomi, but she did not allow them to weigh her down. Even though she had been through so much setbacks and losses in the land of Moab, she was willing to face what the new land had before her. Ruth had faith and trust in God, the God that Naomi served. She had heard about what God had done for the children of Israel in verse 6. And somehow she trusted that that same God would help her amidst all the darkness and failures that had plagued her life. She was resolute. She was resolute. She was determined to go into the new land and work towards her desires and work towards her convictions. When I look at those two key verses, 15 and 16, your God will be my God. And she even went further and said, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. This is one of the most profound stories of determination, of being resolute in moving ahead, in moving forward, in pressing into new lands, in pressing into a year that we don't have an idea how it's going to look like, how it's going to take place, how it's going to take shape. The new year for us, it's like a map. It's like a map, a big map. And in most cases, you need a GPS to find your way. And I'm here to let us know this morning that the GPS for us in this new year is Jesus. For many of us, as we prepare to move into a new year, there are anxieties. For others, they've been through so much setbacks, so much losses, so much failures. And they're not really ready to get into the new year and do new things for God and do new things for themselves and do new things for their families because of the losses, because of the setbacks that they've experienced one way or the other. For some, they have some big visions and projects, but they're not sure how they're going to execute it. And thus, they become skeptical. Scared. Can I do this? Can I press forward? Can I get this done? Is this thing possible? Remember, we can access God's providence by first showing appreciation of where we are. We can access God's providence by prayer. We can access God's providence by intentionality. We can access God's providence by being resolute. In the book of 2 Timothy 1:7, Scripture tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind, of a self-disciplined mind. The new year is like a big map before us. How do we figure out the way to go? John 14:6 tells us that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is our way finder as we move into the new year. As God's children, we're empowered by God, and we should become resolute to follow Christ all the way through this new year. There are some things that we're going to experience in 2019 that probably we've not experienced before. But we must remain resolute to follow Christ all the way through this new year. God had gone ahead of Ruth into the new land, as we see in the rest of the chapters. She became successful in a land where she had no resources, where she had no savings, where she had no investments. She did not let her setbacks deter her. She did not let other people's analysis of her life deter her. She did not let the fear of the unknown stop her. She was resolute. She was determined to go and explore new grounds. Like I said earlier, we all have some form of fears and anxieties at this time of the year, especially as we transition into a new year. For me, there are mission projects that still feel very burdensome to me right now, and I'm thinking, God, that's how am I going to get these things done? This people, this community. I'm talking about back home where we're having some mission projects, and so we have, like I said before, we all have different things that are in front of us as we move into the new year. How do we break new grounds as we reach into the new year? How do we re-strategize? How are we going to begin to pray differently to get new results in the new year? For us as a church, what are the new ideas and thoughts that we're having? What are the things that we need to what are the things that we need to begin to do differently in the new year? That we must become intentional about. That we must become resolute about. We must be resolute, and we must put our eyes on Christ, the Waymaker, the Pathfinder, to help us navigate through this new year. Our eyes must be focused on the Waymaker, on the Wayfinder. Because there are many things outside there that are already prepared to distract us, to take our eyes away from the Waymaker, from the Wayfinder, from Christ. And some of them, they come softly, slowly. So we must be resolute. We must be intentional about the things that we are going to begin to start doing in the new year concerning our walk with God, concerning our service in the house of God. Intentionality is so important. Intentionality is crucial. When I looked at this story, Ruth was determined. Her intention was clear. It was clear, crystal clear. She didn't get halfway and say, "Oh, you know what? I can't. Just go. Oh, I've been to church so much. You know, this month. I've been to Bible study so much now. You know, I think I need a break." Intentionality, being resolute. Lastly, as I close, if you're here today and your heart is filled with fear, apprehensions as regards next steps in your life, you can ask for prayers. Our elders are here. Or perhaps you want to go into the new year as a new person, baptized and raised with Christ. Our elders are here to walk you through that process. Or perhaps you feel tired spiritually and emotionally, and you want God's strength for the new year. You cannot do it alone. Ruth did not do it alone. She functioned in a community. She had people who supported and encouraged her. If you're here and you have any of these concerns, please step forward, and any of our elders will pray with you, and they can also visit with you after the service, as together we stand and sing.